Can you move that back? Thanks. And I've done, like many of you, and continue to do a whole gamut of family medicine, from hospital-based medicine for our patients, mostly office, some nursing homes, stopped delivering babies a couple of years ago. After doing obstetrics for about 20 years as well. But for me, a particular interest has been geriatrics. And that was something that just developed a strong affinity for the older patients that were sharing with me their life stories. Very impressed with their wisdom, with their experience, looking for some way to champion what they were doing. They were downsizing within their own houses, proudly trying to stay in their own homes, and having a real difficult time not wanting to do that, trying to do that. But they all wanted to. I'd also been the medical director of a nursing home when we went from a nursing home on the top of the hospital to a new independent freestanding facility. Been the medical director of assisted living homes. Have started a small cluster of home-like assisted living homes of about over the last 15 years. We've created a small network of 7 homes that now have about 60 residents scattered around the county, with 6 to 8 residents in each home. Most of them are over age 90, and 90% of them are on state assistance, and we've been breaking even doing that for a decade and a half. Not very easily, but we've done it. But the Holy Grail was how to keep people in their own homes. That's what everybody wants. And as some of my first patients wagged their finger in my face and said, "Don't you ever think of putting me in a nursing home," it was clear that we had to come up with something else. So home-like assisted living was a start. But really the Holy Grail was how do you keep people in their own homes. And so a number of years ago now, almost 5 or 6, I started brainstorming with how do we use off-the-shelf technologies, good old-fashioned neighborliness, webcams, motion sensors, video calling, video conferencing, buttons, anything that we could find that was cheap and that worked most of the time to help individuals stay in their own homes. And over the last 5 years now, we have been able to keep about 100 folks that were between the ages of 80 and 105 in their own homes for up to 4 years for about 10% of the cost of assisted living or nursing homes. And so after doing that, I got somebody to say, "You really should write this down." And so I self-published a book about a year and a half ago, a little over a year ago actually, because I just picked it up from the printer 2 days before this meeting last year, and then was able to present it here. And so this is a bit of an update for those of you who have already heard or seen of some of this work. I'll run through my typical dog and pony show slideshow pretty quickly, and then I'll give you an update on, I think, where we've gone since then. So this is the title of the book. The new publisher wanted it to be not a black cover and not so bleak, so it's now called Alone and Invisible No More.
I like that.
Okay? As opposed to a black cover with my dad in a wheelchair on the cover, it now has a person into the sunset or sunrise. So I like it. It's okay, you know. And Nick Cervanos has an endorsement on the back. Howard Dean does. Ted Fishman, Dennis McCullough, the slow medicine guy. So a lot of people have promoted these ideas in a variety of ways. And I've got some copies if people want it, or they can get it on Amazon or Kindle or other things right now. But really, calling it the main approach to elder care, our national attempt at this is now called Full Circle America, because my medical practice is Full Circle Family Medicine. And How we get here? Well, as we all know, we've got a youth-oriented country. People retired to places far away from family. Extended families moved across the country. We thought we were doing a pretty smart thing by creating retirement communities. We didn't really realize we were taking elders out of circulation, and that we were segregating 25% of our population from an intergenerational connections, and most people want intergenerational connections. So the whole paradigm shift is something that we physicians have to think about very, very differently. This is the most important part of it, and that is there's got to be an attitudinal shift. Most elders desire connections to family, friends, community, personal interests, pets. It's not about pills, fall risk, bowel and bladder function. So any facility that gets graded or built around those particular goals will fail in terms of meeting people's needs. Folks want meaning, they want purpose, and those things that give them some reason to get up in the morning are the non-medical parts of their lives, not the medical parts of their lives. And so the good news is that if you start embracing this, trying to meet their needs is really quite easy. If the first thing you ask an 85 or 90-year-old is, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? What are your goals or aspirations? What's on your bucket list? You don't look like you're dying tomorrow, so what do you want to get done in the next year or two? It's a bit of an elder empowerment movement to say, oh, gee, no one's asked me that question in 10, 15, 20 years. I don't have a ready answer to that. The answers won't tumble out right away. But the simple answers that do come out are really not very hard to meet or exceed their expectations. The other part of it is if you start looking at this whole cohort as a solution to the demographics and economics that we're dealing with, rather than a problem, you have an unlimited talent pool to accomplish anything you want to accomplish. I encourage you to do this in your own communities. I call it here, the elders as a hidden resource. If you take the largest employer in your county or in your town, see how many people they have, and then you take 10% of the over 65 population in your community, and you ask them to contribute 4 hours a week to something meaningful, you will have more full-time equivalents than the largest employer in your town or county. So that's 10% of those over 65, 4 hours a week. And most elders want to do more than that, and a larger number than 10% want to. So we have enough of a people resource to do anything that we put our minds to. What we have to do as a community is figure out what are the tasks that need doing, and how do you parcel them out in bite-sized enough pieces and reliably deliver whatever services we choose that this population, this cohort, this community of ours wants to deliver. It's also about using existing community resources that are already out there. How do you use the schools, the cafeterias in those schools, these senior centers, the community centers, the churches, all of these places in ways to accomplish whatever this elder cohort desires in order to have a meaningful life. And again, you can't do this without some technology. So obviously when I first started doing this, everybody was saying, oh, that's Dr. Teel, he wants to put a camera in everybody's house and spy on them. You know, once the book came out, it was a bit more about, well, no, there's a whole mission here. And I live in a town of about 2,500 people next to another town of 2,500 people. And I sold 1,500 copies of the book at the local bookstore. So clearly this resonated with a lot of people in our community. And most of them said, at the end of the day, these principles and this focus gave them hope rather than despair. And so it has become an incredibly powerful message. I didn't realize what a central vein that we've tapped into by starting to talk about these particular principles. So the technologies are very simple, but how you employ them, I think will give you a sense of what we're trying to do. This happens to be a version of a Lifeline or a Life Alert or other type buttons. It happens to be made by a company called LogicMark, and it's called a Freedom Alert. The advantages of this particular thing are that the speaker and the microphone are on the device. Another advantage is it has a little wristband that comes with it, or you can wear it around your neck or your waist on a belt clip. And so this is we use it more as a personal communication device than a 911 button. So if the phone rings in the house, I can press this button and it answers my telephone. So I don't have to fall getting out of the chair to try to get to the phone on the third ring or something. I can program the base station that when I press this button, it can go to my daughter, it can go to our house, our office, our medical office. It can do whatever I want it to do before it goes to 911. So we can have this go to our concierge person, our, what did you guys call it, that personal health nurse? Okay, this can go to that person. We like to think that the person that is answering this is really your fulfillment person for whatever it is. I'm out of dog food. I'm not sure where to find a babysitter for my granddaughter when they're here next week. It can be any number of simple things. But again, it can go to 911 also. But again, if you think about it as how do you break down loneliness and isolation, and how do you use existing off-the-shelf stuff. No monthly fee with this, so we can roll, and it goes to your local 911 center. It doesn't go to some out-of-state or out-of-country 911 or emergency center. We also use a variety of webcams, motion sensors, and we tend to put them in the common spaces of people's homes. So we're not trying to necessarily put them in bathrooms or bedrooms, and the few folks that have asked us to put them in their bedrooms, we try to sensitively angle them to the trouble spot between their bed and their bathroom where they're likely to fall, rather than watch them sleep. Again, sometimes folks say, well, if I have trouble, I really want you to know that. So we point it at their feet. Actually diagnosed a little restless leg syndrome and other kinds of things along the way, but that wasn't the point. The motion sensors, we tend to put these in the bathrooms, or if we just have a web camera downstairs in their living room, then we might put these in the upstairs bedroom, so if they're not seen, we know where they are. The cameras are pan and tilt cameras. They can be accessed by the family members wherever they are in the country. They're password and ID protected. So the family members can look at these on their cell phones. They can look at these on their office computer. They can look at them at their home computer. And fascinatingly, the possibility that technology could become warm and fuzzy never really would have occurred to me or anybody else until you can be immediately transported into your dad's kitchen or living room whenever you need a little fix of mom or dad, or whenever you're feeling a little guilty that you haven't seen or talked to them often enough. And when you see them in their own home environment doing fine, it assuages a lot of guilt and really makes you feel an awful lot better. So these things are doable. They're off the shelf. The pan and tilt cameras can be accessed. What we end up doing is we put a monitoring service together with these so that we spot check these individuals 4 times a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So we actually have the ability to pay attention to what's going on. But it isn't all security. We also use something called a flip video camera. This happens to be a very simple device. We give these out to some members. We ask them to create the video content on our website that they would like to see. And so they can just put this on the table, press the red button, and it gives you 2 hours of very good audio video of what's going on in this room. And then when you're done, you just upload it to our website, and they can share birthday parties, they can share concerts that they've been to, they can share a whole lot of things. So the cohort creates their own video content way better than a lot of 85 or 90-year-olds spending all their time watching reruns of 3.5 Men or 2.5 Men or whatever it is that is on TV endlessly. But what has really become the gateway device for a lot of these folks is a standalone Skype phone. And apart from what you saw this morning, where, yes, Skype is not easy in all places. The audio cuts out at times. The video you lose because things get transferred from whatever broadband carrier in your town. During the call, it changes, so they get dropped. It's not perfect. But what's quite fascinating is this thing only does Skype video calls, not a blessed other thing. But when I couldn't get my dad to open the computer, lid, press the on button, move the mouse to the app, that was 3 too many steps for somebody to be able to use this thing. So this thing is always on. It has a touch screen. It's Wi-Fi enabled. All I have on this is the menu of pictures of the people I want to talk to. We preload this for folks with their own, get them a Skype account if they don't have one. So when they get this out of the box, or we plug it in at their house, they already have their daughter right there. We plug it in and we say, okay, you want to call her? We made sure she's home. And then they have instant gratification, instant success, and this thing becomes a very special device. If I'd asked them ahead of time, do they want a Skype video phone? I never would have gotten a positive answer. You include this with everything, and pretty soon the 85 and 90-year-olds have this in their lap all the time, and they're talking to whomever they want to on a very regular basis. So we've taken these gadgets and put them together in a package. Now the package has to do with this attitude as well. So again...
Can I ask a question real quick? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So who's paying for the equipment?
We're including all of the equipment, all of the installation, and all of the monitoring, and we're doing it for $400 a month. And so they...
the families pay for it.
Family, individual...
not insurance?
Not insurance. Actually, we have... This is all wrapped into some personal care service as well. And so when we do have a couple of customers whose long-term care insurers, when we send them our EIN number and what our motto of what we do, they have paid that bill under their long-term care insurance payout. But it is, so John Hancock has paid for it, Golden Rule didn't, some of the other players have not. But again, I think, the question is, do you want to get this covered by Medicaid? That's a whole different story. Do you really want to have this be defined as a medical model? Do you want to keep it as a non-medical add-on? There's an awful lot of stuff here where I can show you reams of data that show volunteering a couple of hours a week will lengthen your life, reduce your rate of heart disease and depression, improve your chronic disease management. So I can show health improvement outcomes. There's a lot of data that says loneliness and isolation and being widowed, female, and alone has a lot to do with who ends up in nursing homes and assisted living homes. So there's an awful lot of good interface to talk about, but I'm a little nervous about having a government agency try to define what the real value is of this for individuals and move it entirely into the medical sphere.
Does the company that does Skype know that you're doing this, by the way?
I don't think they do.
Maybe they should.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
Really,
I mean,
they
they
heard
would,
what you were doing with their technology? I mean,
Yeah.
they would just be thankful.
I think so too. So this is our letter, and good main name. And in my former medical parlance, I probably would have described her as being a 97-year-old with end-stage renal failure who weighs less than 100 pounds and needs her nephew to help her sit up. As opposed to saying Arletta's a 97-year-old lifelong musician who spent most of her life since starting an all-girls band in the 30s and still plays a mean honky-tonk piano 2 weeks before she dies. I think that secondary description is how she would rather be referred to. And everybody along this page is the same kind of way. This woman, I would have been mostly frustrated with the fact that she has chronic numbness in her hands because she's got carpal tunnel syndrome and she's got enough dementia that she won't wear her wrist splints on any regular basis. But if I actually try to engage her as a school teacher who taught second grade in town for 50 years and ran a restaurant during the summer and still is an incredible flirt, there's probably a whole lot of other things that I could probably get out of that interaction if I start thinking of her more broadly, and if I'm going to try to engage her in community, what is her value to the community? This is kind of the metaphor for what we're doing. My wife has started a version of a Young at Heart performance troupe. Some of you may have seen the Western Massachusetts Young at Heart group that got a lot of folks from assisted living facilities to start singing heavy metal and Aretha Franklin and a whole bunch of other things, and they've gone around and they're now on worldwide tours quite often. My wife did a very different version of that where, because she's more into song and dance, she's got a lot of folks who, and she went one step further and went to the dementia units and a whole lot of places where people had no abilities, had never been on stage, and if they didn't say no to her, they somehow got recruited, into being a part of this performance group. But she took folks who have a lot of physical and mental frailties, and over the course of a year, they went from just kind of staring blankly to most of them participating in a very meaningful way in the performance that came out in the other end and was very well received by the whole community. So you can do an awful lot with the people in your community if we look at them somewhat differently. The demographics we're all aware of. The population over 65 is tripling. What people are not paying as much attention to is the population over 85 is quintupling, and the population over 100 is increasing 20-fold. So that there will be 1 million Americans over age 100 by 2050. Those are things that we've never ever faced. And these are not just some anonymous tsunami that's going to hit us. These are our friends and neighbors. These are the plumbers, electricians, school teachers, postmistresses, people that plow for the state and everything else. They are our neighbors that we're talking about here. This is it in pictorial form. What we've done is, and I'm sure most of you are aware of the sticker shock of trying to find nursing home care for $10,000 a month or $100,000 a year, or assisted living for $6K or $70,000+. And if you're lucky enough to be able to find enough people to work for 15 or 18 bucks an hour around the clock so you can stay in your own home, it's going to cost you even more than that. So doing what we've been doing with remote monitoring, we've been able to show that you can keep lots of people in their own homes for a very modest amount of money. We've taken people with Alzheimer's disease because families were looking for a place for them and couldn't find a bed in our area. And we've provided 23 hours a day of remote monitoring with 1 hour a day of on-site care, half an hour in the morning, half an hour at night. And again, you pick and choose. Most of the people that came to us were folks that were there because there wasn't another option. We didn't cherry pick. We had a lot of people that were falling through the cracks in a variety of ways. So with targeted personal care supplemented by remote monitoring, our patient care numbers were about $700 per month for this cohort. We have people that were declared nursing home eligible, were in nursing homes, left nursing homes because they didn't want to be there, and went from paying $10,000 a month for their care to $600 or $700 a month, depending upon how much personal care their particular situation demanded. There were other folks who were in assisted living homes, and they went back home again. Economically, for our entire community, every community of 50,000 at the current utilization rates will need to build 400 more assisted living beds and 200 more nursing home beds in the next 20 years. That will cost the communities $100 million in capital build and $50 million a year to run them. When you translate that to the 15,000 households that are in that community, that's a $5,000 per year surcharge some way or other for every single household for a thing that most people don't want. What do these pictures look like? These are some of the actual photos that you get from these webcams. That's Stella with her Alzheimer's disease. That's Neil and Ginny. I'd like to show Ann in the bottom left here. She decided to put a webcam in her house because she was trying to get her kids off her back. It worked really well to shut them up.
Are those rugs?
I'm sorry?
Are those bunched up rugs?
Oh yes, it's everything that you would think that would be a problem. But the fascinating thing is if you keep people in their own environment, they don't seem to have as many problems as if you move them to a strange environment. Again, more photos. My poster girl, Helen, in the bottom left, we kept her at home for 4.5 years. After she left the nursing home, she had one ER visit for a Band-Aid on her forehead and one overnight hospitalization for rapid AFib, and those were the only things that she had to go through in the 4.5 years after she left the nursing home.
Are you going to address what happens when they do start getting close to the end?
She died in her own bed.
And that's what they prefer?
That's what they prefer. She got a pneumonia. She and her daughter said, "This is where I want to be. Can you treat me here?" We had to ramp up the care from, an hour morning and evening to a few hours more, to supplement what the family was doing. Main guide on the bottom right, disabled man whose wife was still able to drive a school bus for a few more years because somebody else was watching her husband. These are the tools that we've used in a variety of ways. This is our particular package. But what that's the book. But what I really wanted to say is this stuff is starting to catch on, and I want to try to encourage other people to consider this kind of a model in their communities. Since the book came out, I've spoken across the country via radio on about, just in the last 3 months, in 30-hour-long radio interviews from Philadelphia, New York, Boston, LA, Miami, Atlanta, San Francisco, Seattle, Santa Fe, Duluth, it doesn't matter. Incredibly well received in all of those places. We've made the audacious boast that we want to try to replicate this model in 10,000 communities across the United States in the next 10 years. If we do that and each small pod has 50 to 100 members in it, we will reach about 1% of the target population. So,
You just said, how big is your operation right now?
we're in one county, and we serve about 65 people right now. We've had about 100 that we've served. Some have died. And we really have not had any failure rate. We've had families bail where they say, this is just a little too messy. We don't like the risk involved.
How big is your staff?
We have one full-time person and 3 or 4 part-time people.
Are they over 65?
Pardon me?
Are they over 65?
Who?
Your staff.
No, they're not. No, they're all.
Did you ever think of that?
Actually, what I will tell you about here, good question, is I don't actually have it on that. The really big part of what we do is having an entire cohort volunteer. We make it a requirement for everybody to participate in some way. We set the bar really, really low. So one of the volunteer requirements may be that you need to call somebody else as a phone tree and keep a log. We train them on what we call actionable information, and it might be someone needs a birthday cake or someone didn't sound so good today. And then we ask, and then it's our job in the office to deal with that. We don't ask them to do more. With this video phone, we ask them, once you're comfortable with this, we might want a single mom, harried mother of 2, to be able to call you once or twice a month. Is that okay with you? So the volunteer bar is really low. One of the folks with Alzheimer's that we have, her volunteer effort is she's got a nicely tuned piano in her house that she loves to sing to. So if you will go into her house and play piano, you've got an audience. That's her volunteer effort. So if you actually define volunteering very broadly, there is no way that everybody can volunteer in some fashion. Questions? Yes, sir.
First of all, this is blown away. This is fabulous. I'm proud of what you've done. How do you make this scalable?
Let me tell you, and I know I'm already cutting into someone else's time. The response nationally has been phenomenal. And what I didn't realize is that every other group dealing with residential care is knocking at the door also. United Cerebral Palsy, developmentally disabled, traumatic brain injured, disabled American veterans. Every single group has said, will you work with us too? So right now, and because the cameras company that I was using got bought by a large multinational telecom company, I'm at the very final stages of a very serious partnership with them to be able to roll this out nationally. So and I've been asked and have served on some strategic planning sessions with AARP. So it's looking like there's a possibility that we could cobble together AT&T building the devices, series of devices, with AARP marketing it, with FMEC providing the physician leadership to go into communities, and UCP providing the leadership to go into the developmentally disabled population and fundamentally change the whole residential landscape in the next couple of years. So what is unclear, and clearly all the bean counters say you can't make this work with a heavy volunteer effort. A lot of the other industry people say you can't get physicians to be altruistic enough to try to do this. And I would beg to differ with them. We've started to run a training program. We've started to try to teach other physicians. And again, the fascinating thing is the collaborators, these 10,000 affiliates are going to come from all walks of life. Some of them will be physician offices, some of them will be disgruntled nurses, some of them will be CAP agencies, some of them will be churches, some of them will be entrepreneurial mom and pop, small business owners. Doesn't really matter. They will have to partner with physicians in some way, but most of this is non-medical. But you really do have to have some medical person who isn't afraid of the dark, and that is usually family physicians, who are dealing with this landscape all the time, and I think we don't have to find every family physician or every PCP to be able to do this. We just need a select few, and Larry continues to reassure me that there are enough of us out there to try to do this, so we'll see over the next few years what happens.
I think that working with FMEC and residency directors, we know people we've trained in the past 5, 10, 15 years who might be ideal partners for you.
Thank you.
May not be a resident right now, so this is a second-year resident, but maybe someone who's been out for 3, 5, 7 years.
There's also a role for medical students.
Yes.
You get them really early, even high school students.
The college and graduate students that I've met eat this stuff up. Absolutely, they're looking for those intergenerational connections.
I think this is great for community health centers as well. My question for you is, when you talk about scalability, I'm curious about what you're thinking urban versus rural. Because you're obviously done this just in the rural setting, I assume.
Correct,
Yeah.
correct. And so over this next year, the partnership with some of those corporate players that I was talking about is to try this in 25 sites that have a variety of different demographic and personnel leadership and see what works the best. One of the most phenomenal things for me has been how the churches have jumped on this, and church groups have said, can we run our own pods out of our church? You know, can we find physician leadership in our towns to do that? A lot of seniors have left talks that I've given, and they're going to go home and they're going to organize their own communities. So they're leaving as militant activists to say, I'm going back to my town and I'm going to organize my town this way. You know, so I believe there are plenty of resource out there to do it. But what we're also trying to do, there are ways to even do it cheaper than what I've talked about. But what we've tried to do is say the people that are working in this space should get paid reasonably well. This shouldn't be a minimum wage job. People should be able to have health insurance. The people that choose to lead these pods should be able to get paid well enough. So we've tried to set up a model where most of the money stays in the local community in the hands of the people that are doing the heavy lifting in the space, the managers, the nurses, the CNAs, the folks that are doing the direct hands-on care, even though we are going to make every effort with the help of the corporate partners to automate as much of the database, as much of a whole series, and that's a whole nother talk, and I apologize for having to throw this much and then leave you with probably with more questions than answers at the moment.
Maybe one or two more.
Okay, you had a question?
Yeah, I was curious if you connected with the time bank movement.
We've thought of it, and again, there are a lot of different ways that could happen. There's a group across the country called ITN, Independent Transportation Network, and you can give a ride to somebody in Albuquerque, and your mom can get a ride in Boston, you know, in return for that. So there are a whole lot of different ways to throw those other things. Again, this is a very tiny effort on the part of myself and a couple of staff over the last few years. There are a million places to go with it. Love to go a lot of those places, just haven't had the resources to do it yet.
Mine was the same. Our neighborhood, the seniors have gotten together and they're creating a village.
Sure.
And I've got one of my residents on the board, and they're trying to just leverage everything from who's going to help fix the fans to build
Right.
the whole
There's
thing.
a Beacon Hill Village movement.
That's where they were
that
trained.
that a lot of people are chasing. No slam on them. They're very focused mostly on a concierge service of making sure I get to the opera, you know, and I don't think they are really looking at what I'm trying to do here is say, you've got to be comprehensive. You've got to be able to handle, you know, your needs going to be different than yours and yours and yours, and we've got to find a very robust platform that can take all comers and
They
not
will love
just some.
hearing about this.